So okay, now this is shortly how the single phase synthesis works. The main benefit of this synthesis is, as I said before, it maximizes the level of audiovisual coherence. But it also has some downsides because it's much harder to attain a high quality auditory and a high quality visual speech mode by doing it this way. Because when I would synthesize both speech modes separately, there would be much more freedom to optimize both speech modes individually. So I need to investigate whether this reduction in synthesis flexibility can be justified by the positive effects of such a maximal level of intramodal coherence. And for this, we conducted a subjective experiment in which we evaluated both the perceived level of audiovisual coherence and we evaluated the influence of this level of coherence on the perceived speech quality. And now the two most important results from these experiments were that first, the highest level of audiovisual coherence was indeed noticed in the speech samples that were generated using the single phase synthesizer. And also we could notice that the perceived quality of a visual speech signal is rated the highest when it is presented together with an acoustic speech signal that is in perfect coherence with the displayed speech gestures. So these findings really motivated to investigate further on the single phase synthesis approach. So the aim is now to enhance the quality of the synthesis, and in my thesis I mainly focused on the enhancement of the synthetic visual speech. But from what we know from the experiment, we have to be careful because what will happen if one of these enhancements would degrade the level of audiovisual coherence? I give you an example. For instance, one of the problems we experienced was that the quality of the synthetic visual speech was affected by over-articulation effect. So the mouth of the virtual speaker was moving too fast to be realistic. Now a possible solution would be to enhance the naturalness of this visual speech by applying a very strong smoothing of the concatenations. Because this would indeed smooth the visual speech and it would make it more natural. But we could notice that when then this highly smoothed visual speech was displayed audiovisually, it suddenly appeared mumbled because it did not match anymore the acoustic articulation that were played together. So we could notice that this very strong concatenation smoothing degraded the level of audiovisual coherence, and this way it degraded the audiovisual speech quality. A general rule of thumb that always should be taken into account is the fact that the observers really have to believe that the virtual speaker they see in the synthetic visual speech mode actually uttered the auditory speech information they hear in the corresponding acoustic speech mode. Only then people will believe it's a real recording. So the goal was to improve the naturalness of the synthetic visual speech, but without affecting the visual articulations too much. And now our idea was based on the observation that in fact the visual speech information can be split up in kinematics information, for instance the movements of the lips. Of course these kinematics have to very closely match the speech information, and the amplitude of these kinematics defines the visual pronunciation strength. On the other hand, you have this overall appearance of the virtual speaker, and this should vary very smoothly, because otherwise people will never believe it's a recording of a real human being. And now the problem we experienced is the fact that the visual speech information in our synthesizer is represented by a video signal, is represented by a series of images. And it would be much easier if we have some kind of model of this visual speech information, because then we could perform a more accurate analysis of the visual speech, but we also would have more flexibility to modify the visual speech information to improve the quality. And the most ideal case would be that we have a separate representation of all the various aspects of the visual speech information. For instance, we would have a separate representation of kinematics related aspects, of appearance related aspects, of non-speech related variations, and so on. And this is why we decided to build a new synthesizer based on AAMs. AAM stands for Active Appearance Model. So we are gonna model the visual speech using such an AAM. Now, very briefly, what does this mean? Well, imagine here I have a frame from my database, so I have image information. Based on this image information, I can calculate a series of landmarks indicating the position of the lips, of the mouth, and so on. And now the position of all these landmarks we call the shape information. Based on these landmarks, we can define a triangularization, so we can define triangles between all these landmarks. And now we can sample the RGB pixel values of the image with respect to these triangles, and this we call the texture information of the image. So our original image can be represented by shape information and texture information. And now an AAM is able to separately parameterize the shape information and this texture information. So at the end, we just have parameter values, so just two sequences of numeric values. So summarized, using an AAM, I can go from image information to parameter information, and of course also the other way around. So now if we apply this AAM modeling to a movie, so if we calculate for each video frame from the movie the associated parameter values, and when we do this for a whole movie, you can see that every parameter is assigned a series of values over the movie. And now, for instance, I can plot here this first and this third parameter on the x-axis, where the x-axis means the video frame. You can see that every parameter is assigned a sequence of values we call a parameter trajectory. And so every movie can be represented by just a collection of just such parameter trajectories. So our AM-based synthesizer looks like this. So the main difference in the database is the fact that now it's a collection of acoustic speech information and parameter trajectories. And then these trajectories allow higher quality segment selection, and they also make it much more easy to concatenate the selected segments. At the end, we now need an extra processing step because we have to go back from these parameter values to image information, because of course in the end we need images because we need to generate a video signal. Now the fact that we parameterize this visual speech information allows multiple optimizations to the synthesis. For instance, we designed a database normalization technique that is able to remove undesired variations from the recorded visual speech. And this make it possible to for instance, normalize the position of the head of the speaker. So in each video frame of the normalized database, the head of the speaker is perfectly aligned. More in general, this parameterization using AAMs makes it possible to generate smooth and natural synthetic visual speech, because we can avoid jerky transitions going from one selected segment to the other. And we can remove unnaturally rapid variations that are present in a synthetic visual speech. So we can avoid this over-articulation problem we experienced with the initial synthesizers. But because we have this separate description of all these various aspects of the visual speech using this AAM model, we can smooth the visual speech, but without generating an under-articulation effect too. So we can enhance the quality of the synthetic visual speech without affecting the level of audiovisual coherence. Now, using this AM-based synthesizer, I was able to synthesize speech samples such as this. So you will see synthetic audiovisual speech generated completely automatically, so I only gave text input to the system.
Aan zee waait de wind soms vrij krachtig uit het noordoosten, met pieken tot 50 km per uur.